Can reindeer as a food source save the Norway region's polar bear population? That's what we're going to find out on today's episode of the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking polar bears. There was a really interesting article in phys.org, that's phys.org, a great place to get your ocean and other science and physiology and physics, all types of science information. There was a recent article that was published, I would say, November 28th, so actually today, the day of recording, we see a video that was posted that looked at in Norway's region of Svalbard archipelago, and it was actually posted in August 21st, 2020, or it was viewed, observed, and filmed by a local research station that was watching a young female polar bear chase a reindeer into the water, drowning it and bringing it back up on land to be able to eat it. Now, this is something that we've seen, or that they've seen in the Svalbard area a couple of times, and more than a couple of times, a number of times. And it's something that they are wondering if this is something that's increasing as the sea ice is retreating. The sea ice in this area is retreating more faster than other areas, and some researchers are worried that we're not going to see ice there for a long time, so they're worried that this is going to continue, obviously affecting the way polar bears feed. And to understand why that's affecting it, you have to understand what polar bears are. Polar bears are considered a marine mammal. That means they spend most of their time in the water swimming a number of different distances. Some have been observed to, I think the longest is over 700 kilometers. A lot of them will swim for 60 kilometers at a time, and they rest at sea ice. And they'll rest on pieces of sea ice, scattered along in the ocean. And they need to breathe water. They need to breathe air. They can't breathe water, so they're a marine mammal. They need to actually have their air breathing, and they need to rest, and so they need to be able to breathe air. And without that sea ice to rest and breathe air and just chill out for a little bit while they get back into the water, they can't find their main source of food, which are seals. And in this area, they don't really mention the exact seals. I'll see if I can find it later on. But they do have, seals as their main source of food. They're fatty, they're big, they're 200-300 pounds, sometimes 400 pounds, and they're just, they're perfect. They're exactly what they need. They need that fat for that energy, and they just need to continue to eat on that. But if they don't have the sea ice, then there are going to be more polar bears that are either stuck on land or that they're going to drown because they have nowhere to rest. And they're just going to, when they get tired, they're just going to eventually drown. And that obviously is not good. And that's what's affecting polar bear populations across the world, across the Arctic. And they're concerned, especially in this area, because there's less sea ice than anywhere else in the Arctic, or there seems to be a more retreating sea ice in this area, that this is going to be a population that is going to be gone within the next century, according to a quote from a researcher in this in this article, which I believe it was de0ffb0d5, which is I forget where I think he's in this. Where is he from? Sorry, I forgot where. I lost my place. Anyway, he's a researcher that knows the area quite well. And he's Andrew de0ffb0d5, a professor at the University of Alberta, and he's worried that this area is going to be retreativized so much that you're not going to see polar bears within the next century there because of the retreating sea ice. But the observations made in this video, what really prompted this article, was that have polar bears been switching diets because they're more land-based now? They can't go out as much because there's not as much sea ice to rest when they need to rest. So are they hunting land animals like reindeers? Reindeers can be 200-300 pounds. They're very important. They could be a very important diet to polar bears, and they have been known to fed on them back in the 50s and 60s. And since there, every once in a while, they will catch a reindeer. So is this something that is new? Is this, polar bears adapting to more of a land-based diet because they can't go out as much? This was in the summer months, so this is not their main hunting season. It's a lean part of the season because the sea ice has gone out. It's not around, so just because it's summertime. So where is what is that diet? So this observation, apparently that same young female later on was found feeding on a carcass as well, another reindeer carcass. So they're wondering, hey, is this something that we need to be concerned about? Is this something that's going to switch their diets? Can this save the population of polar bears? With that said, in Svalbard, another population over in Canada could feed on caribou. Both populations of reindeer, like caribou as well as reindeer, have had a ban on hunting. And so they are not necessarily worried about their population size. I think reindeer in Svalbard are about 20,000 in size of population. So they're not necessarily too worried about that population going downhill. And there's a ban on hunting. So that's not going to be affected by humans in that case. And so, we need to look. Do we need to look at that as more of a mainstay of their meal if the polar bears can't go out? Same thing's happening, like I said, with the caribou in the Arctic in Canada. You see every once in a while a polar bear will feed on a caribou. It just doesn't happen that often. One of the reasons why they say it, one of the researchers said, hey, sometimes, these are land animals and reindeer can run for long distances, caribou as well, on land, and polar bears just can't do that. They can't keep up. And so it doesn't look like it's going to be, a sustainable source. And so they're going to have to worry, about going that route. This doesn't look like it's a replacement meal because they probably can't catch them. And especially during the summer months, it's going to be a very difficult time. Usually the bears are a little more emaciated. They don't have as much energy as much as they did. Their main diet, it has to be a fattier diet. Reindeer, caribou are gamier meat. They're not as fatty. And so, especially when you compare it to a seal. So the researchers are thinking it's not going to replace the meal, but it could, act as some kind of supplement when they need it, if they can catch one. But the right sort of, the stars need to align, so to speak, and they need to catch them by surprise. And so although this observation was something that was really interesting, it definitely isn't something that researchers are worried or are suspecting that this is going to change their diet. We might see more of that diet, but it's not something that is going to happen, that's going to happen on a regular basis. We're still going to see it every once in a while. It's not going to happen all the time. And so that's going to be something that, we need to look at it. And as Ian Sterling said, while occasional successful predation attempt on reindeer may be good in the short term for an individual bear or two and the media, I think that there's little significance in the population level for either polar bears or reindeer. So they don't think that everything's really going to switch. They don't think the reindeer population in Svalbard will go down because of more hunting by polar bears. And they don't think that polar bears will switch to hunting reindeer full time and actually have an effect on bolster their population. They still require, the food from seals, and that's something that's really going to be interesting. The other thing that one of the authors said is, we don't know how long this has been going on for. Social media, video cameras on your phone have been around for the last few decades, and we've been able to observe more, right? There's no doubt about that. With technology, the ability to be on the water, more people to be on the water or be around wildlife and actually film wildlife, whether it be nature documentaries or scientists who are filming more and taking more observations and being on the water more and looking for these things more, doesn't mean that there's been an increase in reindeer predation by polar bears in the Svalbard area. It does mean that we've been able to observe it more. We know that they've been feeding on them for since the 1950s and 60s, and so it'd be very rare to have been seen at that point. And so, and there were also very few people looking for bears and reindeer. And now that we have more, the ability to say, hey, we have more of these options or more of these people looking out for this stuff, it just means that, hey, you know what? We're just out there more. We're observing it more. And so we need to look at that from the perspective of, hey, this is something that we are observing more. We're actually filming it. We're documenting it. now is the time to maybe look to see if it's going to be increasing or decreasing, but we really don't have a good reference point because that data has not really been collected to my knowledge. If you do know if that data has been collected, love to hear from you. It'd be great to get somebody from Polar Bears International on, which is, I believe, a Canadian organization, but it's international in scope because they look at polar bears all around the world. It's in their name, international. But they're a great organization that knows a lot about polar bears. We've had some of their collaborators on this podcast before in the past. I think it's time to bring them on again to talk more polar bears as we get closer to winter and it gets colder. It's good to talk about polar bears. But anyway, that's the episode for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I thought it would be fun to mix in some ecology here, some wildlife biology, but look at how climate change is affecting and maybe seems to affect some populations. Some populations are adapting maybe a little bit more, maybe not. We don't know. It's something to look out for in the future. Anyway, if you have a comment on this episode, if you think polar bears are actually increasing in land-based animals, which makes sense, I'd love to hear from you. Go to speakupforblue.com and just leave a voicemail at the bottom right corner, or you can go and leave us an email at the contact page on that website. And I'd love to hear from you. To be honest, if you want to contact me through Instagram at speakupforblue, Twitter, TikTok at speakupforblue, and of course through speakupforblue.com. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Speak Up for the Ocean Blue podcast. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.